Discover the heartbeat of Lexington at the Marriott City Center, your premier downtown destination. Let us handle all your meeting needs, whether you're planning a corporate gathering or a special celebration. Our elegant, versatile spaces provide the perfect setting for every moment. Don't forget about our great room bar, a perfect spot to stop in after work or before a game to enjoy handcrafted signature cocktails. You don't need to be a hotel guest, just relax and unwind. Whether you're gearing up for the game or winding down afterward, Lexington Marriott City Center, your ultimate destination to stay, connect, and celebrate. We've got everything you need to make every moment unforgettable.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Charles Dickens wrote that famous line to open A Tale of Two Cities, capturing an era of jarring extremes. And right now, Morgan, in the world of Kentucky athletics, that line has never felt more true. In one city, Rupp Arena, we are witnessing a renaissance. There's a feeling of pure, unadulterated nostalgia, the kind that Kentucky basketball fans haven't felt in years. A shorthanded Kentucky basketball team didn't just beat the number one team in the country, they dominated Purdue. It was a statement so loud and so powerful that I'm starting to see jokes already circulating that they've carved out a space in the trophy cabinet for the 9th national title trophy. Mark Pope's hope is palpable, but in another city, Kroger Field, it's a story of the worst of times. The offense, led by a promising Cutter Boley, finally shows its teeth. The offense finally wakes up with Cutter, showing us exactly who we thought he was. Boley and those freshman receivers providing a brilliant, hopeful glimpse into the future of the program, only to be completely undone by a defense that surrendered 49 points to its rival. A familiar refrain for the football program, and it forces us to continue to ask the hard, uncomfortable questions about the direction of the program under Mark Stoops. I remember at 7 years old, I heard B.B. King's The Thrill Is Gone, that slow, painful acceptance. And for so many in the Big Blue Nation, that thrill, that belief, feels like it is truly gone from the Stoops era. From the soaring, dominant high of Rupp Arena to the deflating low of Kroger Field, we're breaking down the tale of two programs right here on the LetterWinner pod. Back in the booth, it's a new week, new opportunity for the basketball program, the football program, and the other programs at the University of Kentucky. How are you this evening, Morgan Newton?
Hey, Jeremy, I'm well. You took me back to British literature, the great Carmel High School. I appreciate that Tale of Two Cities adage to get us rolling today. I think you're right. It is in some ways a tale of two cities in Lexington. It happens so often. There's so much energy around basketball. And it gets you to the point where whether you really want to be or not, you find yourself in a scenario where you feel like you got to cheer for one or the other. People don't really say that, but there is a sense that it's like, are you a football guy or a basketball guy or girl? It shouldn't be that way, but we've struggled through it so much.
It shouldn't.
We've struggled through the football side so much. And when you start thinking about the allocation of resources, there's a conversation that has to be had at different levels in the athletic department about how you're going to allocate resources going forward. And that's a topic that the powers that be are going to have to spend some time on.
Morgan, let's get started on the hardwood tonight. I think it's better for everyone's health that we do. We'll talk a lot about X's and O's this season, about recruiting wins and tournament seeds on the basketball side. But there's something else happening on this Kentucky bench and this Kentucky basketball locker room, something that's a little more quiet, but in my opinion is just as important. I think Mark and Leanne Pope are truly fascinating individuals, but they're dynamic as a couple. I think Mark and Leanne Pope, that they're modeling something for these players and for all of us that goes far beyond basketball, especially in a world where many of these young men and people in general are coming from broken homes or have never had a front row seat to see a strong, healthy partnership, and they're getting one now. They're getting to see two spouses actively working together to support each other's dreams, especially Mark's. They're seeing a leader who's also a dedicated family man. They're being coached, whether they realize it or not, on how to find a life partner, how to build a family, how to support your kids, and how not to quit when things get tough. It's a little idealistic, but that's what makes it revolutionary. I think most coaches, they're happy trying to separate sometimes the family life aspect from the professional side. Mark Pope does such a good job of making his family feel as involved as they want to be. I love the piece that came out of UK Sports Network, to sit down, that Michelle did with Leanne Pope a few weeks ago. I don't think that these players, they probably don't fully grasp it now, but in 10 years, when they're starting to build their own lives and their own families, they're going to look back and they're going to be grateful for the example that they were shown. These guys, they're just not being taught on how to set a screen, how to take a charge. They're being shown early how to start to build the foundational pieces of building a legacy that extends further beyond just the basketball court.
Yeah, maybe the ceremonious example of husband and wife, I think that means something to parts of the fan base, I'm sure. I think it's important to show that example. I also think that a lot of those players are more interested in the $22 million that's been advocated to this basketball program and what piece of the pie they're going to get. So, yeah, I think all that sounds really good. I think it looks good on commercials and in the Tops magazine. I think all that stuff looks good. But you and I both know it's about where you allocating them $22 million. That's the part that is going to impact this basketball team and maybe this team's chance of winning number 9.
I thought that you would come with that realistic perspective, so I'm prepared to double down even more. And in that double down, one of the resounding themes that comes from Mark Pope from his press conferences is the theme of love, brotherly love, to be specific. He's not okay with these players just respecting each other. He's adamant that these guys love each other. Why do you think that is? I've never been in the locker room before. I've never had a coach that insisted that I love my brothers. I've been in there where coaches say, hey, we're not all going to get along, but we need to respect each other. But he's doubling down and taking it a step further. And when I see that thorough dismantling that they put on display in Rupp Arena on Friday night, I saw guys having a good time. It's obviously easy to put the smiles on when things are going in your favor, when you hold the Purdue Boilermakers to 38%, the number 1 team in the land. But what this basketball team, despite having young pieces, Morgan, they did not get bullied. They did not get pushed and shoved around. These guys went in and they executed a game plan at a very high level. They were disruptive. We saw young players getting involved, young players being embraced. I thought Mark Pope very intentional, and even Jalen Lowe from the bench, about providing a lot of energy to these young players, especially Jasper Johnson.
I think a monolith is the goal, right? I think you'll hear any successful team program try to aim to be that one cohesive unit. The respect versus love each other thing, that's going to come with time, with relationship building, having a common goal. This team is headed on that path. They have an immense amount of talent. Matt Painter's been around Purdue a long time, and he's built his program not on transfers, but on really developing players, specifically players in the Indiana area, and keeping them for multiple years. To be able to play a team like that has grown up in that program, and they've been able to build a culture and pretty much handle them, I think speaks very highly of where this team is as a unit today and what opportunities they have to grow as the season goes on.
How do you think this dominant performance shifts the fan base's mindset, if any?
They're going to enjoy this team. If this team is winning, the fan base is going to be right there with them. If the team's not winning, the fan base will be right there with them. But I think that it's been a few years since the Kentucky fan base has had teams that they feel really strongly about potentially winning a championship based on the performance in the first exhibition. It should be a game, by the way. I think they feel like they got a team that can win it all, and that's exciting. I was in school when we won it all in 2012. Nothing more fun than when the team's successful and there's a chance to cut down the nets.
It was intriguing to listen to Mark Pope. He clearly looks at the data before he sits down and gets in front of the media. He said that the MVP of the game was Colin Chandler. guy who only had 2 points. It was a nice 2 points. It was a nice dunk. He was the MVP because when you look at the stats, the team was plus 15 the 15 minutes that he was on the court. I just find that to be so impressive that a guy can have that type of impact in such a short period of time. Moreno looked very impressive. Garrison at times looking very impressive. I think those guys pass it really well. They have really good vision to catch some of these guys slashing, cutting to the basket. There's opportunities there for them to continue to improve. But, I mean, for the first time out this season against a veteran team like Purdue, man, if that's the baseline, what a start for Mark Pope here in year 2. It's going to be fun to watch them continue to grow.
There was a lot of excitement at the Tennessee game with some people that I was watching the game around, and they're already gearing up and ready to go for the Champions Classic and having conversations about that Champions Classic. One of the next times you get to see Kentucky play a blue blood type team in a neutral site.
Of this past weekend's performances, which campus athlete increased their net worth the most?
I think we know who it is. It's that Boley. When you talk about stock rising, it's number 8. It's Boley. Cutter stock has risen as much as anyone this year. We hate to say we told people so, but we knew the immense amount of talent that he has, the measurables, and it's showing in these games. You're seeing some numbers and some statistics, granted, in some losing performances, but you're seeing some statistics that we haven't seen from a young player in many years. The future is very, very bright for him. There has to be people that are interested in seeing Cutter in the blue and white for years to come.
Tad Johnson wasn't impressed with the offensive play calling a couple weeks ago against Texas. But when you dive in and you look at some of the stats, you mentioned how Cutter is an equal opportunity quarterback. I didn't know what you meant by that. I thought that you were making a political statement when you said that on the pod a couple weeks ago, but now I know what you mean. 12 pass catchers in the Texas game, 8 pass catchers this past week. The guy's facilitating. He's throwing Wilson around and getting a lot of people involved. Morgan, he's really starting to show that versatility. Mark talked about it a little bit tonight. The thing that's been so surprising for him with Cutter's precipitous development week over week is his ability to be accurate with the off-platform throws, the throws on the move. That's something that Mark says that they had seen in practice, they had seen in the scrimmages, but he is accurate, moving, rolling out the pocket, these types of things. We're just not accustomed to seeing college quarterbacks with his stature, with his size, also being able to get out of some of these situations, being able to evade pass rushers. He's showing the ability to pull the ball down and move the chains, move the sticks with his legs. He is literally transforming, developing, and growing week after week. And it's been a long time since I've seen a player put it together like this so quickly.
Yeah, you see the progress. And then on top of that, this is the first time this year you've really been able to evaluate the people around him, like the receivers, the tight ends. We weren't in a position where you could really make a determination on what kind of talent you had until you got somebody out there that could distribute the football. Kendrick Law has come on in recent weeks. A big piece of that is attributed to being able to spread the field and get the ball in his hands, much like we were seeing Cutter get the ball in the hands of the tight ends. How about the emergence of a couple of young players that have showed up in the box score these last few weeks? The only disappointment that I think we had is that we had an opportunity to even be a little bit further along. He didn't really start until a few games into the season. He probably should have been starting from day one. That's a criticism because I think we would know a little bit more about who we are. Maybe Texas is a little bit different if he's got a little more experience under his belt. Maybe Ole Miss outcome's a little bit different if he's in that game and spreading the fields. What took us so long? Why were we screwing around early in the year?
I don't know if we'll ever get the answer to that. That is definitely something that we were calling for pretty early on. I remember sending some messages to some of the people close to the program, just out of curiosity, wondering what was going on, when they were going to make that change. I'm just glad that it happened because now Cutter is able to grow with snaps. He's able to grow on the road. And speaking of on the road, how does he keep the momentum that he developed after a slow start in South Carolina? He was able to get into a rhythm in Athens, put on a performance down there that hasn't been done in 25 years, last by our guy Dusty Bonner. where he was efficient throwing the football, but also racked up over 225 yards in the air. Now he goes on the road into the heart of Dixie at Auburn, a stingy defense, a very opportunistic defense, tough place to play, rowdy fan base. It's going to be at night. Auburn getting their season back on track after a 4-game losing skid in the SEC. How does Bush and company keep Cutter efficient going into must-win game at Auburn?
Yeah, these road games they just play differently than the home games do. You know, there's going to be a significant amount of crowd noise. There's momentum swings that take place on the road. The last couple of games on the road, we've struggled with turnovers, sustaining drives, time of possession, and getting them off the field on defense. Specifically in the South Carolina game, the turnovers were really the key difference between winning and losing. And when you play on the road, you've got to be ahead in the turnover margin. At the minimum, it's got to be a stalemate. That's a critical component to road games and road success. You've got to sustain drives. You've got to be efficient offensively, ideally early in the game, to try to keep the crowd from roaring later in the game.
You and I also talked earlier in the season. I asked you the question, what goes into a young wide receiver getting themselves in position to be able to get on the field? And now you're starting to see some sentiments also shared online that, the freshman wide receivers and Cam Miller and DJ Miller, if they have been this good, why haven't we seen them sooner? I thought you did a really good job explaining what goes into that. You and I both know that this Bush offense, it's not a basic garden variety offense, that there are complexities and nuances to it, which prevented some of these players from getting on the field. But I also know that DJ at some point, he had gotten a little banged up, but I'm glad that fans have been able to see what he's capable of, because I went to a few fall camp practices and scrimmages this year. And one of the practices that I went to, DJ Miller had a day. He was making big plays, big catches. So the next practice that I came out to, a few days deeper into camp, one of the first questions I had for one of the offensive coaches was, has he hit the wall yet? Young guy, freshman, hard to sustain that. You and I both know that. Your first collegiate camp, it's hard to sustain that. And sure enough, he had hit the wall, Morgan. That's what I was told. He had hit it. I think that there was a lot of conversation that was happening behind the scenes between him, Coach Washington, and just the offensive staff of just trying to get him back into a rhythm, getting back into a groove. But the ball that Cutter dropped to him to pull it back within 2 touchdowns, a long 56-yard touchdown pass, you were able to see his speed and see him get behind that slot DB for Tennessee, who I think was very surprised by how big and how fast DJ Miller. There probably was not a whole lot of tape for him to prepare for what he experienced on that.
That's a great point in terms of getting these young receivers ready to play. They've got to get adjusted to the speed of the game, just like everybody else from a young receiver point of view. Bush likes to carry a plethora of formations, shifts. That's a lot to learn. It's a lot to pick up for a young player. A receiver who's going to line up at different parts of the field, understand where to line up, what routes to run, what your assignments are, and things of that nature. It takes some time in certain offenses to get freshmen rolling. Now, with that being said, there's ways that you can expedite it by telling them what to run every play, and just tagging it for them if they've got that kind of talent. But I think they found some things with these 2 Miller players and with Rodriguez and Kendrick Law's kind of gotten rolling. All of a sudden, you're seeing some sparks offensively.
What I loved about the Law play, we talked about the different type of explosives, the explosives by design and the explosives by blocking. Mm-hmm. And the blocking out there on the perimeter is what propelled that. And Law, being a really good ball carrier, he did a good job of setting that up and allowing the blockers to get leverage, and he played those guys inside and was able to bring it back outside. Just crafty on his part, but the play call doesn't have to be this perfect play call where it's a 56-yard bum to DJ Miller. It can be just a little dump down. It could be a swing and flare, but if the guy's out on the perimeter, if they're blocking and you have some dynamic playmakers like Law, you see that he's got the ability to take it the distance against SEC defenses. These are the kind of plays that we've been starving for all season, the kind of plays where it's a little dump down and boom, it's gone. It's out the door because you got good players that are capable of blocking. You got good players with good speed, good vision that can take it the distance. And I think that's the thing that I really liked about the way that we scored, the way that we moved the ball. You saw gashes in the run game. You saw Patterson. You saw Dowdell getting involved with some good blocking. You saw Boley pulling it down. getting some good runs, extending with his legs. You saw short passing game working. You saw deep passing game working. This is the recipe to be able to get on the road against Auburn and come out with a victory when you're scoring in different ways. You tell me as a defensive coordinator, when you saw what the Kentucky offense did this past weekend against Tennessee, you probably didn't like to see the things that you saw because there has been tremendous growth in Bush Hamden's offensive unit here in the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of criticism of Bush, Cutter, in terms of what's happening with the offense, but I think you've got to give them credit. You know, Mike Hartline, a guy that was one of my OGs, as they say, one of my vets. He's on the team and on the staff helping with the quarterbacks. Bush is helping with play calling and quarterbacks. There's something about what's going on with Bush, Cutter, and Hartline and staff that's working. I think it's something to know. There's a lot of the words get thrown around, apathy and wanting to see changes or shifts from a coaching standpoint. When Mitch evaluates what to do going forward, you got to pay close attention to the development of the quarterback, and you've got to view that as a positive. Now, there might be plenty of other areas of opportunity, but Cutter's growth, we still haven't seen the end of it. I think he's still got a lot of room to grow. There's something these last couple weeks that has been working offensively.
Does the emergence of Cutter and these freshman wide receivers, does this pose economic problems for the football program heading into this offseason?
I think it's always going to be difficult at the University of Kentucky based on some of the financial limitations and parameters. Is the pie big enough for basketball and football to both be successful? I think that's always going to be a question here. And you have to define success in order to make that statement true. But my opinion and impression on success for those two programs is Kentucky basketball playing for a national title, Kentucky in football going to bowl games and having an opportunity every few years to get in the playoff. And I think it's going to be very difficult for those two things to happen consistently based on some of the financial parameters.
So much of it with football being a physical game, a physical sport, is out of your hands. The health of players, the nagging injuries, those type of things that you can't control. Unlike a sport like basketball, which sees fewer injuries than a sport like football. Just look at these availability reports, and they're littered with names of potential starters that aren't going to be lacing up for their team on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So then you got to rely on depth. So I don't think it's unreasonable to come out as a program and just let that be known. The expectation is bowl games. But every 4 or 5 years, we expect from a recruiting and development perspective, we expect that we're going to have a team that has the ability to be a playoff team just based on the formula, the game plan that's been laid out by staff, which maybe 75% of it is recruiting high school kids and developing them on the football field and in the weight room. And then 25% is going to be where we go out and we're aggressive about the players that we're going to bring in on a short-term basis to fix maybe some of the deficiencies that could prevent this football team from being a playoff caliber team.
Tennessee last year, it was a 10-2 football team that made the playoffs. Kentucky these last few years has won 10 games. Now, granted, it took a bowl game, but they were really close to being at that 10-win mark. Clemson, 10-3. In my opinion, is not out of the realm of possibility a couple times a decade for Kentucky. I think that's what you have to work towards. Those are the goals and aspirations you have when you go into a year. Can it be a double-digit win team? Because we've seen it happen in the last 5 or 6 years. And I think you also got to look at some teams that have really adjusted well to the modern era of college football. Some that are in bordering states like a Vanderbilt, like an Indiana University, that have traditionally been schools that don't win a lot in football. Well, guess what? They're in the conversation now. So you got to look at that and decide, okay, why can't Kentucky be in the conversation? Like those schools are in the conversation. Because the resources, I can tell you, are not that much different. They are two different situations than what Kentucky is. But Indiana has high basketball hopes, just like Kentucky has high basketball hopes. Kentucky's had more success recently in the last 20 years. The program and administration is going to be working to figure out, How can you reach your goals in both sports based on where rev share is going to be and what your real NIL potential is?
Who decides if the game plan, if the approach is suitable? Is that purely the job of the head coach to come in and pitch to administration, hey, this is what I need, this is what it looks like? Does the athletic department, do they have to go do their own research to get some of these things? Do they got to bring in one of these Deloitte consultants that we've been talking about here of late? How do you decide what the plan of action will be moving forward, whether it's right or wrong?
Well, I think it starts with identifying what your goals are. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? I laid it out for what I think it is, but I think it's important to hear from leadership of what their success criteria is, what their goals are. I heard Matt Painter talk about he wants to be consistently in Final Fours. That is a very specific goal that Matt Painter and Purdue has. I heard it in the press conference. We need to hear and understand that from our administration. For the football program, it doesn't have to be championship or bust. I don't feel like the fan base feels that way. I don't think they think it's championship or bust, but I think it would be good to know and understand, hey, these are what we're working towards. If we make a change at head coach, which there's a lot of people over the last 48 to 72 hours that think that's going to happen, when we bring somebody else in, what are our expectations of that coach and that staff? What can we look forward to? I think it starts with establishing your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, and then doing it within the rules. If that requires consultants, if that requires other types of stakeholders, you got JMI in the mix. I think you got to identify all of that sooner rather than later.
Boley led Kentucky with 330 yards on 26 for 35 passing. That 74% clip that you've alluded to, getting up over 70%. Went for 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. He also carried the ball 7 times for 31 yards. When you have a quarterback that has been putting up stats like this, it's had the level of success that Cutter has had, running the offense, spreading the ball out, running the ball, short passing, deep game. Quarterbacks like this, in-state homegrown talent with this type of upside, they only come around, Morgan, about every 20 years.
Yeah.
Is there a sense of urgency that needs to be on display for UK athletics to say, we have the right quarterback that can turn the tide here pretty quickly? This is the situation where we need to be aggressive with our allocation to support Kentucky football because we got the most important piece, and that's QB1.
I don't know that there's ever been more of a need for a sense of urgency. To your point, we have not had a quarterback with this much promise in a very, very long time. Even for the historians, and I'm not one of them because I wasn't paying that close attention to Kentucky football in the 90s, but I'm not sure that everybody knew what they had in Tim Couch after his first year of playing in that offense.
That's wild.
It's been rumored that some do, but that was right at a coaching change, right? And then they brought in Mummy. There is an immense amount of urgency, or at least should be, because this, to your point, in Kentucky, a hometown kid, you don't get players like this but every so often. I don't think he or his family would have an issue with me saying this, but they want to be here. This is where they want to be. This is the school and the place, the home state. There's a lot of ties here. This is where they want to be. So I think it's important to try to do the things to keep him here. I feel very confident based on the teams that they've played recently that he's going to have suitors that are going to be highly.
You're saying people sliding in the DMs?
I don't know. But I feel confident he's going to have suitors that are going to be highly interested in making him a big part of their future because they've seen him play like you see it on tape. I mean, what does the score look like what does this game against Tennessee look like if he's not playing in the game? I mean, and again,
oh, man, you want to talk about nightmare.
You go back and watch the tape. We gave up 56. Cutter at least gave us, and it's not just Cutter, but Cutter, Bush, offense, freshman receiver, so on and so forth, led by Cutter, put 34 points on the board in a game where it was empty. It's empty in the fourth quarter. So you tell me, if Cutter in this team was not a part of the game, what does it look like? What does that Tennessee game look like? Who we view to be a rival. I don't know that they feel that way, but Kentucky feels that Tennessee's a rival. So what does it look like if he isn't playing in the game?
An absolute massive.
I say if ticket sales matter, if interest in the program matters, What do you think he's worth?
I think Cutter Boley's the most valuable athlete on campus. What is that worth? I don't know. I'm not in that business. I just know that I've been following this kid for as long as he's been a Wildcat. I know that you have a relationship with him that predates him coming to UK, but from the body of work that I've seen from him, I've been very impressed. I know who he is. He's him. And I hope that the athletic department knows that. If I'm a father and this is my son, there's so many things I'd be looking to get information about, insurance policies, restructuring agreements, because this wasn't the deal. When the depth chart got announced, you announced that my son was the backup quarterback. Now he's the starting quarterback at an SEC school, and he's putting up school record numbers as a redshirt freshman. I need to know that the coaching staff and that the administration, that they have what's in my son's best interest at heart. I'd have a list of questions. I'd need someone at the top to be answering them.
It's all speculative, Jeremy. Speculative. Clearly, there's some bias. But how many guys that are starting in this league do you want more than him based on the pieces around him and the situation around him?
This guy solves a lot of problems.
Now, keep in mind, too, a lot of the guys that they're currently starting are old. Pavia, Stockton. There's only a handful that I think it's worthy to even have the conversation for those that know and understand ball. When you compare Cutter's situation to that of Nussmeier or Mateer, to that of Aguilar, I just think you got to look at that situation. And the people around the university understand this and know this. I think everybody's going to do the best they can, but we wouldn't say it or talk about it or spend time on it if we didn't feel like it mattered. We certainly don't want this to be an oversight. If it's an oversight, I think it'll be a huge mistake. I think we got to be very intentional about how he's compensated. Who do you bring in to support him if you make changes? And what role are they going to have in his future? And what does he think about his future? What does he want or is interested in a coach going forward? Is he a part of that conversation? I think all of those things have to be considered.
No, I agree. Morgan, on the other side of the ball, the defense's collapse against UT can't be ignored. Gave up 7 touchdowns or 49 points. I don't think I can view this as anything short of a systemic failure. I think the touchdown before halftime was just demoralizing. Is this a talent issue, a schematic issue, or a deep cultural problem on that side of the ball? What are your thoughts on what we witnessed from Brad White's defense against Josh Heupel's offense?
It is clearly a schematic issue. I'm not saying it's the only issue, because I don't believe that it is the only issue. Brad White is a great human being with a great family, but Heupel in Tennessee just flat out has his number. I genuinely feel like if they didn't slow down in the third quarter when the game seemed to kind of be in hand, Heupel could have scored 70 at our place. And we've had really good teams.
Yeah.
These last few years, I was just kind of looking up the stats. 2024 gave up 28. 2023 gave up 33. 2022 gave up 44. 2021 gave up 45. Like, it's clearly a schematic issue with Tennessee that's got to be figured out.
A lot of good players will tell you that there's particular plays that happen over the course of their career that were responsible for helping them flip the switch to be a better player. I can think back on those plays for several guys like Chris Restry, Derek Beatty, most recently Maxwell Harrison and Carrington Valentine. Both of those guys openly talking about some of the traumatic plays for the past season. We have been speaking highly about Tyrion Nichols, a guy who we view and feel has tremendous upside. And that has not changed. But this past week, Tennessee was able to take advantage of him. We know that this Heupel offense puts those guys in some tough situations where, quite frankly, there's nobody over the top one-on-one. We've talked extensively about the soft zone coverage. Well, this past week, Morgan, there were some opportunities to get up and do some bump and run. And I noticed some guys, they were not able to get up there and press or make contact, gave up some free releases. And these Tennessee wide receivers, they made our corners pay and pay tremendously. J.Q. Hardaway at times, to Ryan Nickel, giving up, I believe, 2 touchdowns on his guard. Where does the secondary go from here after such a tough performance? Because when I look at this Auburn offense that's coming up, they got a guy in Cam Coleman, number 8, 6'3", 200, and he's as pretty of a wide receiver as there is in college football. He's a guy that can go up in high point, just a sophomore. What does this secondary have to do to recover from what just occurred to them last weekend?
I think they've got to reset the depth chart in the secondary. You've got to try to find guys that are going to get the job done. We're not talking to Jeremy about a lot of man-to-man coverage. That's never been a big part of the formula for Brad White or any Stoops defense. We're talking about a defense that plays the majority zone coverage. They're responsible at times to be force players in the run game, and they're responsible to play their zone and to key on their responsibilities. Look, I believe that the front four and at times the linebackers are playing really. We've been pretty good against the run, and we've been strong in creating some pressures, specifically against Texas, but also in this game. There's too many times where we give up big plays in the secondary, and I think they've just got to reset the depth chart and try to identify who can get the job done in the back.
Jeremiah Cobb, big Auburn running back, he's going to be trying to get a pulse check on this Kentucky defense. Hugh Freeze has got a great memory. Jarquez Hunter last year going for 278 yards last year in Kroger Field against Brad White's defense. Jeremiah Cobb going to be looking to channel some of that energy, some of that momentum from last year. This Auburn offensive line, still big, still physical. He's a physical running back. Got good speed. Morgan handed the ball off to him 28 times last week in an SEC matchup. He delivered. They are going to come out and they're going to try to run this football. I've noticed extensive linebacker rotation play. I think I counted 5 guys, maybe 6 guys rotated in those linebacker positions. It sounds like they've reset the depth chart there. I'm just curious if there's enough on film to try to lock down and stay with the core group of guys, or if they're going to try to keep this rotation going. I don't know if that helps them going to Auburn this week, but I guess time will tell.
Those guys are playing up front. Very, very productive. That gives you something to be excited about. You've proven you can score some points. It's going to be crucial to stop the run against that team because Auburn really ran it all over us last year at Kroger Field.
I still see Jarquez Hunter running around town sometimes. Just depends on what time of the day. But you can still see his silhouette line running down South Limestone. The guy had a day. It was as good of a day as a running back that I can remember in recent memory. I mean, to run for 280 yards in an SEC matchup, a game in which you start slow, you end up down 10-0 to start that game. It looks like Kentucky is going to do everything that they wanted to do to Auburn last year, and then the wheels just come off. The dam broke, and they never look back. When you look at Arkansas last week against this Auburn defense, Taylon Green, the Boise State transfer who was with Bush at Boise State. Green finished 14 of 22 for 268 yards and a touchdown. He had 2 interceptions until he threw in the last drive. He threw his 3rd INT. But the Razorbacks, they came into that game, Morgan, ranked 4th in the FBS in total offense, averaging 514 yards per game. Auburn held them to 331. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about that stingy Auburn defense. Thought Auburn, they did a really good job of disguising some things, but at the end of the day, got enough push. Thought those guys were physical up front. Is this a game where you want to continue to protect Cutter, make things easy for him? How do you help him on the road?
Yeah, I think Kentucky is still establishing an identity, still trying to decide to figure who exactly they are offensively. We're not talking about a game that's more than likely to be played in the 40s, right? This is a game that I think is much more likely it gets played in the 20s. So that's going to put emphasis on turnovers, the turnover battle, the field position battle, and special teams. Those are going to become critical components of this game. And then the other thing we start talking about when you play against an Auburn or Florida, Vandy in certain places is who wins the battle when it comes to the running game, and then who wins the battle in terms of time possession and first downs. And I think this is going to be a great game for stats. I don't expect this to be a very high-scoring game.
Starting quarterback Jackson Arnold was benched last week. Right before halftime, he threw a pick 6. Auburn had to dig out of a hole, down 21-10 going into halftime. Hugh Freeze made the switch, put in backup Ashton Daniels. at the quarterback position, and he led the offense down the field. An effective run game led them to 3 quick field goals in the second half. Auburn was able to get a defensive touchdown in that game as well to get the victory. Hugh Freeze has not come out and said who's going to be the starter this week. If you're Hugh Freeze, how do you make a decision on who to start? Do you reward the guy who was able to get the offense in position to get field goals? Because McPherson, probably player of the game, 5 field goals for him. Kind of a redemption story there. I know he had some misses and some big games earlier in their season, one of which was the Missouri game. Morgan, how do you decide who to go with if you're Hugh Freeze?
Yeah, I think Hugh Freeze has got to think about what does it take to win one game. His job is on the line, too, much like many coaches in the league. He's got to figure out how to win a home game. You want to go with somebody who can move the ball down the field, possess the ball, and not turn it over. So I think there's a very good chance we see Daniels again because it's going to be at home. He did a good job of getting points out of those drives, but it's different when you're at home versus away. It's really critical that you possess the ball and lead the team that way. So it'll be interesting to see what decision they make and where they decide to go.
This Kentucky defense giving up 30 points per game. That's not a stat that I anticipated for this unit this year. Giving up 253 passing yards per game, giving up about 385 total yards per game. We talked about not an advantageous defense in terms of getting the ball away. Kentucky's 117th in FBS with a -6 turnover margin compared to Auburn, their 13th ranked defense with a +7 margin. Wow. How important, how critical is it for special teams and for defense this week on the road to be able to generate some turnovers?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that Mark has learned that points are important. I hope he's learned that it's okay to take 3 points. It's actually an objective to winning the game is scoring points. So I'm hopeful that we will choose to take points when we have the opportunity. Because this very well could be a game you win 20-17. Every point's going to matter and every point's going to count. So I expect that we have to play really good in special teams and really making sure that you gain great field position to put yourself in position to score points.
What's at stake for this football team for the remainder of the season?
I think there's a lot of pride on the line, Jeremy. As crazy as this sounds, I think the very tough teams in terms of the rankings are behind you. You've got Vandy, and I can't forget about Louisville, but that's a rivalry game and anything can happen. So you oddly have a chance. You've got 5 games left. You've already won 2. I mean, you've got a chance to get to 6 wins, 7 wins. That wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. I don't feel that Auburn is better than us, and I don't really feel that Florida is better than Kentucky either. So as disappointing as this season has been, we've also come off of 3 straight games against Georgia, Texas, Tennessee. And I think a lot of people felt like going into the year we would have lost those games anyways. No one wants to hear this, but you have an opportunity to win 4 out of these next 5. 5 out of these next 5, as far as I'm concerned. I think you take it week by week, and I think you try to go win a game and see if you can then from there stack wins together. Like, I think that's a real possibility.
I think it's a real possibility too. I agree with that. But the winds have taken a turn. And I think that there's been a loss of trust with some of the fan base. The questions are being asked. What were we doing to start the season? How further along would this offense be had Cutter been the person from fall camp to present?
If you look at Auburn's schedule for comparison, because Auburn is not one of the elite teams in the league. We're 0-5, but they're 1-4, so not that much better. Their losses have come to a ranked Oklahoma, a ranked Texas A&M, a ranked Missouri, a ranked Georgia,
right.
And they still got to play Vandy in a ranked Alabama. And they're 4-4.
And all losses of 10 points and less.
Exactly. And they're 4-4. The teams that they beat, South Alabama, Ball State, Baylor, all non-conference games. And then they'll have one more left in Mercer. So they've got 1 SEC win. We've got 0. Who's to say that Auburn is a better team than Kentucky? And look, I know about the whole broader scheme of things, but I think when you hear Mark talk in his press conferences, I think he's looking at the schedule too, and he's saying, I got as good enough a chance to beat Auburn as Auburn has to beat us. And if they win that game, okay, you play Florida, who's already gotten rid of their coach. So then what? We win 2 games, then what?
Things get really interesting. I know Mark, I know what kind of guy he is. I know that he has to be fixated on some of the personnel decisions, some of the game management decisions that have been made over the course of this season. Second guessing himself. I just feel like some of his game time management, more of it's coming from the gut than it's coming from the data. He made the quip after last game. They asked him why he went for 2, and he said that the data told him to. Did you see that?
Yeah, I was sitting in the stands with our good friend Jacob Tammy, and I couldn't figure it out either. We were sitting there, and we were like, we have a chance to get to 21. We go for 2 there, and I couldn't figure out what we were doing. 20 is not that much different than 21, so I don't understand it. Now, look, we've talked about this on the show before. When you're at 14, statistically, the way the odds work out, you should go for 2 if you score, go from 14 to 6, because you got a better chance of winning in regulation than you do in a coin flip overtime. Maybe the same logic applies to 28 to 21 or to 20. I couldn't understand that. But to your point, they had the perception of a snafu at Tennessee, and then some of the second questioning around Ole Miss and Texas. And those are 2 games. They're important, don't get me wrong, but like game management wasn't really a factor at South Carolina. It wasn't a factor at Georgia, and it certainly wasn't too big of a factor at home against Tennessee. So I hear the criticism. I think it's fair. I think he's kind of taken that criticism. But if he beats Auburn and Florida, and we're sitting in a scenario where we're 4-5, I think things do get really interesting.
You beat Tech, who's 8-0, averaging like 50 points a game.
Yeah, good team, but also different class. But let's say you end up in a scenario where you're 5-5. Then what do the conversations do? Because I'm not sure Auburn is better than Kentucky. I'm not, man. I'm not sure of that.
I think the only thing that makes that tough is it's a night game and it's on the road. If the game's in Lexington with the crowd behind you, we know that you got a good chance there. But getting over that hump, the losing streak with SEC opponents.
You think Auburn is going to be rocking like they would if they were 7-1?
At 7:30 at night on Saturday, yeah, I think it's going to be rocking. I think that Eagle, when they let him loose, don't throw anything up in the air.
Nah, you're probably right. Go win this game this weekend and see what happens. See how the discourse changes.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the LetterWinner Pod. Thank you for going on this journey with Morgan Newton and I. You can follow us on just about every major social media platform using the handle @LetterWinner Pod. I'm Jeremy Jarmon.
I'm Morgan Newton.
Go Cats.